Hello, welcome to episode 74 of JagaVision, 74th week in a row. I'm Jared Nyberg. I host the show every week. You can check us out on Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook. Yeah, lots of interesting stuff in our YouTube archive. You can also go on our webpage, jagasilk.com, and find out what's happening next. Today, we are having the show on a pretty powerful day here in Canada. It's actually a week that's been designated by the National Truth and Reconciliation Commission for talking about the horrors, really, that have been visited upon Indigenous people by this country. There's a really, I guess, eye-opening book by Dennis Stannard. Encourage people to read, called The American Holocaust, and it talks about society before the conquistadors in the south, in where the Maya and the Inca and the Aztecs, etc., were, and then it talks about just the how that unfolded, the whole genocide, and then it talks about what happened in the United States and what happened in Canada. And I think there's a big part of me that really gets sad by this. It's I don't know, sad seems like such an understatement. It's really amazing when you can research or talk to folks who are from these ancient cultures. I remember spending time in Japan and being really attracted to the Buddhist and Shinto cultural heritage, and just this sense of the ancient, and coming from a country that I felt in my younger years was quite young and less interesting and really sort of surface shallow. And I feel a little bit better about just this idea of the conflusion of cultures and the interesting opportunities there to learn from folks of different backgrounds. But one thing I think that brought me back to Canada early on was a fascination with the ancient cultures of the area that I was born in, and the areas that I lived in, and the areas that I've grown up in BC, etc. And it's really important to, explore these ancient cultures and learn from them. A lot of times we focus a lot on the spiritual teachings, but the political teachings have me very inspired. I love reading about what's going on in, the histories of the folks of the Six Nations East. The great law of peace is a fundamental arrangement that really allows for participatory democracy, which I think is absolutely one of the major answers for how we could really find world peace, is to have a redistribution of power. So that is really worth looking into. I think this has all been brought about because of the residential school children's graves being found, and how that has made everybody really horrified at this. It's just seeing that hard evidence. It's been talked about by elders and by people in the Indigenous communities for quite a long time. I remember in university having a number of speakers come to the University of Victoria and talk on the trauma and being really affected by it, but to have that hard evidence of children's graves, unmarked graves, is pretty horrific, and I think it really brought a lot more awareness to this. I really encourage people to, that book is great, but to go and see what you can do for researching and understanding what's going on. Currently, right now, the Unistoten Brigade over in Wet'suwet'en territory is fighting the Coastal GasLink expansion of natural gas pipeline through their traditional territory. And so tomorrow, JagaSilk is going to be donating all of our drink, food, retail, everything that we sell through the T-Bar tomorrow is going to be donated to the legal fund for helping out with that effort. And then, so hopefully, something can happen there. Really discouraging news today where there was the completion of the Trans Mountain Pipeline that was purchased by the Canadian government. And that was really depressing to hear that the oil starts flowing tomorrow. Some good news is that the Trudeau government has been forced to pay billions of dollars to children, Indigenous children, starting yesterday, for discrimination against children on reserves, not funding their sort of social welfare guarantees in the way that they would to other folks living on this landmass that the Dominion calls Canada. Anyhow, some heavy stuff. I think important to just connect with it and not let it just be a week or a day. One of the things that I've always really felt to be powerful when it comes to tea is the way that it can be a gateway for conversation. Right now, for example, there's one of the biggest demonstrations against I guess a public demonstration protest happening at Fairy Creek, which is on Vancouver Island here. There's the Pacheedaht First Nation. You have a number of folks in the community that are actually really not happy about the protesters being on their traditional territory, and then you have members of the community that are really stoked that there's the support to fight the logging that is really threatening to take out some beautiful old growth, some of the last standing old growth forests on Vancouver Island. And I was just reading an article by Adam Olsen, a local MLA. Again, recently, there was one, it caught my eye when he initially had it in the news, and it was just talking about the nature of the revenue sharing agreements with the local First Nation, and I remember them just, or him really pointing out the unequal nature of it, where to share in sort of the revenue that was brought about by logging, as an example, the nation had to agree to not support, essentially protest against logging on their territory, and to agree that they would, that they would just promote it and roll with it. And anyhow, it was pointed out how unfair the arrangement was, because BC went into this conversation knowing what they wanted out of the arrangement and not really going there to listen, but went there to say, hey, this is what we want, and to just sort of make it look better. They packaged it up so that it's I guess from one perspective it could be looked at as a step forward, rather than just pillaging and not sharing any of the spoils with the original occupants. There's a little bit of sharing happening, but pillaging probably shouldn't happen in the first place, right? So anyhow, some of the protesters, we've been giving tea because there's a lot of anger, right? So you have people that don't want the protesters there. You want there's the protesters who are like really taking part in this because they want to protect some of the last multi-hundred-year, if not thousand-year-old trees from getting cut down. So there's a lot of powerful energy happening. You can check out the Fairy Creek protests, I'm sure, but just kind of checking things out on YouTube or what have you. But yeah, people making tea helps to calm the nerves, de-escalate the, I guess, really intense passions that can be kind of doing some powerful damage. There's a really amazing book called 3 Cups of Tea that I remember really connecting with, that was written by a fellow who was hiking in the Himalayas, and he got lost, and he was starving, and he was kind of gonna die, and then he was rescued by a local community, and it ended up being that he was brought back to the village that they were from, his rescuers in Afghanistan, and he hung out there, and I hope I'm getting the right country. I hope it's not Pakistan. It's a Stan. Oh, I feel horrible. 3 cups of tea. Anyway, the what he did is he promised the community they would help build a school And I remember he saved all his rent and lived in a storage shed. And then he went back and he helped build the school with his own hands, and he bought the materials and he trucked it to the village, and he helped to build a bridge to get it to their area, because they had always had to go by trolley, like a kind of like a rope, to get to their village. And so yeah, built a bridge, and they put in a school, and then not only a school, but they expanded it so that it could also help keep kids in the community by creating an economic sort of textile creation space, so they had community members being able to make clothing, etc., and sell it, so they'd have revenue. Okay, I'm gonna try this tea out. So but anyway, in the community, 1 cup of tea and your strangers, 2 cups of tea and your friends, and 3 cups of tea and your family. It's kind of a powerful mention in the book. All right, so this is a Yunwu from Huoshan. Let's see how this goes. Smells really nice. High hopes. Oh, that tastes great. That's really, really good. Huh. I'm always surprised. This is one of those teas where I'm aware of the price and it's actually really cheap. And I kind of assumed that it wouldn't be that good. It'd be a little bit flat, but we work with an owner of a farm in Yellow Mountain in Anhui, and she has some really great connections with farmers in the region and a little bit further abroad, and she often acts as a broker for us, and she sends us teas that she finds to be delicious. And she's built up quite a roster of relationships, and so for our parched green teas, we often buy from her, as well as she's got a good connection with a farmer named Mr. Wang and Mr. Sai that create great fresh oolongs that we've been buying every year. That's really good. I'm kind of, when I made this tea, I didn't set a timer. I started the timer, and we got to, what is that? 4 minutes. Yeah, pretty. Normally I would do a 2-minute extraction. Yeah, very nice. Today's show, we were supposed to have Camellia sinensis join us. I was pretty excited to talk about the tea book that they wrote, but due to a confusion around Pacific Standard Time versus Eastern Standard Time, we unfortunately do not have our guest today. So today's show is going to be with Sherri Anne from Sister Speak, and I enjoying a traditional matcha made with the matcha Okuyutaka. So we're going to try and reschedule the session with Camellia sinensis Tea Company in Montreal, and we'll see what happens. Okay, I'm going to try and see if I can't invite Sherri Anne. Let's see. Let me try and add her. Okay. Invite sent. And see if we can't get her on the call. Okay. The Okuyutaka is actually kind of interesting because it's a matcha that we wanted to do more single cultivars with Takaki-san, and this year he was able to get some special access to this one. I'll talk a little bit more about it once I get Sherri Anne on the call. But for now, Yunwu. So Yunwu, this tea that I like to do all my sessions where I drink a little bit of tea that I've never had before. And this particular style of tea is considered one of the older styles or one of the oldest, if not the oldest, styles of making green tea in China, and you can see why. It's just very stable, very simple to make. Young leaves, rolled and parched. The parching process, of course, is what they use for the kill green, and you want to kill green within 23 hours of harvest to be a green tea. What I find really interesting about a style like this, where it's saying a huo shan, is that normally you would find it from Lu Shan, so it'd be a Lu Shan Yun Wu, but Huo Shan is just a little bit of an unusual origin for the tea. Hold on one sec. Just trying to get Sherri Anne on the call. So the Huo Shan region is more commonly making Maofeng, or like a premium leaf green. This particular style is something that they've been doing a little bit more recently. So yeah, very nicely done. We've also had a Huangya from the region, and also what's kind of cool is that our that the lady I was telling you about is actually from the region where this is created. So very cool. Might be something that we bring in after the Longjing. The cup smells fantastic. And normally, you know, what I found is that if the cup after you drink out of it smells incredible, you're probably going to be in a good place. Okay. Smells like cotton candy. Amazing. Okay, so looks like I don't have Sister Speak joining me either. I can't seem to get through. So I'm going to just move on to making the traditional matcha with this particular cultivar. It is one that we've been asking Takaki-san for single cultivars for a number of years. A couple years ago, he was able to convert a abandoned tea field into organic production for us. And we promised that we would buy the entire lot if he grew it for us. And so every year we've been getting it. Last year, unfortunately, he was unable to turn it into matcha. Instead, what he did is he turned it into sencha because he felt a little bit unhappy with. Oh, I think we have Sister Speak on the line. Is that Sister Speak?
Yes.
Yay!
Hi.
Welcome. Really beautiful show today.
Oh, was the audio a little improved?
You know, I would say that.
Was it too loud?
No, it wasn't too loud. No, it's good. I wonder though, what your is your microphone the computer microphone, or do you have a different microphone that you use for the?
I was using a different one today on the Patreon only.
Okay, yeah. That's what we streamed to the shop. Was the Patreon?
Oh, okay. What are we making?
We're making Okuyutaka by Takaki.
Oh, nice.
So
awesome.
I was just actually explaining to everybody about it, and spent kind of the first part of the show talking a little bit about today, so honoring that a bit, and then we're. Oh. Did you know we're gonna donate all of our T-bar sales tomorrow to the Unistoten blockade happening against the Coastal GasLink folks up in the northwest there. So we'll see what we can do there. Might be a small amount, might be a little bit more. Who knows?
I think that's something I might join you on if. Yeah.
It'd be amazing. So that's happening. Maybe you can just tell your followers, anybody who lives in Victoria, come on down.
I will. I'll announce it. Absolutely. That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
That entire ruins that they just destroyed.
I know. Hey, that was really sad.
Oh man. I mean.
And also that the Trudeau pipeline goes through. It starts pumping oil tomorrow. That one that Elizabeth May got arrested trying to stop, and and it goes through Burnaby from the tar sands. But I was also saying there's some good news is that Trudeau's hand has been forced. He can no longer not pay out that settlement of billions of dollars to Indigenous kids that were discriminated against. He's been trying to appeal that, and he finally, his hand has been forced by the Supreme Court of Canada. So he has to pay out billions of dollars to kids, Indigenous kids.
Wow.
But yeah, I was also explaining just how tea has been a calmer for me, and talking about how it's been utilized at Fairy Creek, even some of our teas, just to help de-escalate some of the emotions and just kind of talk things through and try and figure out some resolutions. And it's really hard, right, when you have really conflicting goals. Like if your goal is to just harvest ancient trees, for example, and that's your goal because you want to create really soft toilet paper, and then you have another group that's like, hey, I want to not destroy all of the ancient forests because I want to protect these landscapes because it takes hundreds, thousands of years to develop this way.
And watersheds too.
So it's interesting because I don't know where the compromise is, and I think that's why it boils over into conflict, because it's just it's the middle. If you're always trying to find a peaceful solution, I don't know what it is, and I feel that way a little bit about just about the keep it in the ground movement, because it's really hard to justify continuing the pillage when there's so much obvious destruction happening. Not necessarily even I shouldn't say just to, but we're talking today about spiritual sites and waterways and traditional lands, and I guess you could say that all of Canada really is another people's traditional land. Sacred sites are going to be all over, because it's a huge landmass. There's I think that when we look at the history and stuff, we often forget how badly populations were decimated by disease when the conquerors came, and it was a lot harder for decimated communities to prevent the takeover of their spaces.
Yeah, when you have 90% death rate from smallpox.
Yeah, it's
Some communities.
Can you imagine? It's like we're going through COVID right now, but can you imagine if COVID was 95% lethal?
9 out of 10 people that
just horrific. It would that's a total social collapse, right? So
yeah, it would be. I think what's interesting too is people try to use the argument in the different types of media that we need to find a way to do this sustainably. Well, even in their attempted often approaches, you'll see there's parts of an area that has maybe smaller old growth trees that aren't as big, but they're still sequestering a lot of carbon, and they're right on the edge of the watershed. Right. As soon as you pollute that watershed, there's not really a lot going back. You need to have that filtration from the trees around the watershed. It's proven you can't have a clean lake if you have all these houses right on the waterfront without any trees filtering runoff.
Yeah.
And then you get all these algal blooms. One day it's not even swimmable anymore. Know, and people want waterfront homes. Sorry, but we don't need to have a view on the water. You want to have a lake or a view of the lake? You want a view of the polluted lake because you want your view? So not everybody knows that. I didn't know that until recently, just how powerful that is too.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, there's a lot of seems really cosmetic, and I mean, I think I was reading an article recently about just how powerful it would be. We talk about carbon capturing machines and all that stuff, but nature's already made one. It's called a tree. Just plant them and just figure it out. It's it's
no, it's we already have all these things. People want to make something to solve a crisis that the earth has already made, and if we just change our planting practices, that's one of the most powerful things we can do.
Yeah.
So that it's actually
Well,
Yeah,
the man who planted trees. What a powerful. I mean, a fictional story that inspired non-fictional copycats, where you have monks
yeah,
planting amazing swaths of land with trees and reforesting, and that's so cool. I remember when I was trying to understand how to sort of cope with the whole Bear Mountain trauma here locally, where there
yeah,
was the blowing up of the sacred caves, etc., and by that hotel builder, and and I was just like, wow, like after it's gone, like million-year-old karst caves, like these places that elementary school kids would go and see, gone forever. Like, wow,
yeah.
they were one of 3 in the whole country. Like, you'd think that these kinds of areas would be preserved and protected, and I was just really shocked. And then I thought, when they found the endangered frogs, there was no way that they would be able to do any sort of road building, and then they just did it anyways. I was like, wow, like without any sort of accountability. And I was like, okay, like I never want to even really go up there. I'm so horrified by the whole development. And then I remember talking to one of the local, well, he's now a Victoria councillor, but at the time he was a professor at UVic, or an associate professor, Ben Isaac. And I was like, what is the appropriate response here? And he wrote me back for the article. He's like, the only thing we can really do is work on rewilding. I love the term. Like,
Rewilding.
yeah, that's an amazing thought. I hope we get to a place as a society where we can
Yeah.
choose areas to rewild, and we don't need this. I wonder how much dead space there is out there. Areas that have been cleared and abandoned.
Yeah, it's like there's not like fun, like just left to be
Yeah.
and decimated and without any cleanup or growth. So that should be priority number one, because those are all just sitting there as desertified soils. When you like moonscape something, for instance, like a
Yeah.
different mining or fracking or even logging operation, you just like completely strip it.
Mm.
Specifically, the first two have more of a moonscaping effect, it seems.
Yeah.
And also, like for instance, the way that the houses are built in Colwood, you
Mm.
see that it's like moonscaped, and trees are houses are put on, and then these little trees out front with
Yeah.
sometimes with the tiniest yards.
Yeah.
And it's like that type of building, I don't think should even be allowed this day and age. Like to moonscape any part of the earth, that should not be allowed by any standard. Like if we
Yeah.
want survival of humanity, like that needs to be I think.
It's really sad because it often happens in very arable land spaces.
Yeah, it's like
And
why this is like
it's like, oh
a
hey,
place you can grow.
it's flat and clear. Okay,
And
let me build townhouses. Well, wait a minute.
you could grow so much food, and not only that, you can't. Then they pass something where you can't grow food in that townhouse complex. So it's like, moonscape it,
Yeah.
take away all the natural carbon sequestering trees, and then not allow people to grow their own gardens. Instead, they're only allowed to grow like flowers, or at least that's something that's grass. But then they're encouraged to use like pesticides, like to keep it like professional. Like what kind of professional is that?
That's just so disheartening, and oh, yeah.
That's why we can. That's why I think that, if everybody makes a decision to want to have more land than the size of their house, if they're in a position to,
Mm-hmm.
and actually do something with it that's natural and working with the environment and permaculture, like that's such a powerful solution for saving humanity.
It's really there's an inspiring part of doing JagaSilk, where when we do go visit farms like the Takaki farm, it's I feel like all these minus ions. Like I feel so
Yeah.
inspired by the oxygen and the trees and the natural environments and the mountains and the air, and it's just this amazing thing. But there is definitely a part of me that looks at it and goes, huh. And that's when I see like big fields that have been put into these areas that were but the trees were like a lot of the mountains are working mountains, where like they were growing lumber, and it's not necessarily old growth, where they were building, they had lumber growing essentially, and then they've taken down these areas to put into tea production. But it would be lovely to see sort of companion planting, if that's possible, or some way of like creating spaces where you could still harvest really easily, but I don't know how it would be done though, because the way that they harvest hay is they have the hedges going in like straight rows, and then you have a tractor that goes over top, and then I don't know what the answer is there, but they're beautiful spaces, and maybe the idea that some farming just requires this. One of the benefits of working with Takaki is, of course, multiple cultivars. And by not having a monoculture system, that's
something's steaming on your stove. Sorry to cut you off, but something's steaming really hot.
Yeah, we're boiling away. We're making red bean in the background there.
Oh, sorry. I just want to make sure it was okay.
Yeah.
It looks very intense from this angle.
Does it? That's funny. Yeah.
I'm so sorry to cut you off.
It's all good.
This is fascinating, because I was wondering that same thing about the fields. Like, how could you do tea without?
Yeah.
With like instead of a. Yeah.
In China, they do arbor varieties of the tea plant, where they allow those tree plants to go from hedge height all the way to tree height, and they harvest with ladders. And so, Mr. Chen, remember when he was talking, he was going into some detail on how that process works, and his tea fields are very much a part of the natural environment. And perhaps that's the answer: is by reducing output. And increasing the height of the trees, you have an opportunity to make them a functioning sort of ecological participant.
Ah, interesting.
And I know in Mandokoro as well, there was the hand harvesting style meant that there was just a lot more. It just seemed healthier, I guess. Yeah. One of the nice things, or one of the encouragements we've seen successfully sort of manifest is definitely moving away from at least reducing sprays and well, not moving away from reducing sprays,
moving away from using sprays. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's been good. This also what we found out is that there isn't as much control over the end product as we'd hoped in the beginning. So something very kind of a little bit of an aside and not really specifically connected to what we were just talking about is this particular tea was really challenging to get our hands on because normally what happens is Takaki-san will grow tea selections, and if it's meant for matcha, he'll take it to what's called a tencha factory. And the tencha factory, what we've experienced with our farmers in Kyoto is that they are able to just bring their teas there, and then when they bring them back, they have control. But what happens with Takaki-san is he has an arrangement with the tencha factory, and apparently this is normal in his village, is that they keep the tencha, and then when he wants it, they mill it for him after creating a blend that they agree on together. So it's blended with other selections, and then it's milled, and then he gets it back milled. So for a number of years now, we've been able to get he creates, I think, 7 or 9 different blends. And we've been able to choose 2 of those that we're allowed to get unmilled. Like that tencha factory's kind of agreed to that. But they've never agreed to unblended.
Oh.
So this is the first year that we were able to get our hands on unblended tencha. Now, that's not necessarily totally true, because even before this one, the Yabukita by Takaki is an organic lot that we were able to get our hands on that was not not blended, and we just buy the whole lot, and that's kind of the deal. And I think that's what we've been learning, is that we just got to commit to higher volumes for them to be able to justify putting something aside for us, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah, because if you do, I was gonna say, yes. I think that the one that we're having now, I was just about to make some. I think it's a little sweeter than the Ninotani, and I was just curious why.
Yeah. So it's actually just a higher quality selection, really. Did I lose your audio there? I think, or maybe you muted it, or your headset came out. I can't hear you, Sherri Anne. I'll answer your question, though. Can you hear me? Maybe give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Okay, awesome. All right, so to answer your question, essentially it's when they're organic, one of the things that happens is when they're bug bitten, the bugs, the leaves will actually release compounds that make the leaves more bitter. And the Okuyutaka that we're having is not organic. It's lightly sprayed, to be brutally honest, which is better than heavily sprayed. But it's essentially that allows the umami to be preserved. So that flavor that we're looking for in a Japanese green tea that's like really lovely is just it doesn't always have to be sprayed, but it definitely needs to not be bug bitten, if that makes sense. I still can't hear you. You might need to. Your mute button might have been turned on automatically by accident.
Oh yeah. Okay. How about now?
Right, now I can hear you. Amazing.
So if it's bug bitten, it becomes more bitter.
That's generally what happens. Yeah. So.
Okay.
So okay, I've done 90 grams over 2 grams. My water temperature I like to be a little bit hotter for the Takaki stuff, so I put it at 65 instead of 60.
Okay.
Your maximum temperature should be 70, so between 65 and 70 is fine. So 3 vessel transfers.
Sorry, my headset came out.
Nice.
So then, in the process of the less spraying, like, they use, like, didn't he say that he sprays it like once, like earlier on?
Yes. Yeah, you were there for his conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's trying to wean off of it,
yeah.
like, slowly, and they're just getting the plants used to not being sprayed.
Mm-hmm.
And then in certain climates, the bugs aren't really a problem.
Yeah.
Because it's where the tea is grown.
It's very scary for him too, eh? Because there's a lot of risk. There's a lot of risk.
Yeah.
And then you would lose your entire lot for that year, and then what's going to happen, right? So
do you so sorry, I interrupted you again. If you lose your whole lot, that would be insane. I was just curious if you test for any of the pesticides in your tea. Could you do that at the lab locally?
We have in the past, and we haven't been getting detectable amounts, but I think we just need to ask for a finer test. So that
would be good to do for your ones that are lightly sprayed.
Mm-hmm. I think so too. And it's actually something that helps sell teas in Japan, but it isn't in Canada. If you
that it is sprayed.
Here it's like, no, in Japan if you say lightly sprayed, they actually have a term for it. It's called te no yaku, which is different from mu no yaku. Mu no yaku means not sprayed. Te no yaku means lightly sprayed. And if you say lightly sprayed in Canada, people just don't want to hear it. They just want to, either it's organic or it's not. And if it's not, they just don't want to have that conversation. So, but I think it's important part of the transition. I think it's good to stay educated and understand that, like when we started, we were told that all Japanese teas are organic, and that's not true. And they were saying, oh yeah, they're just so careful that what they can't spray. And it's like, well, that's kind of silly. That was just a misunderstanding that somebody had, and it became quite a prevalent way of talking about teas. But sorry, I interrupted you. What were you trying to say?
No, I'm just putting the water back on to add a little hot water to mine, because I mixed it a little too cold. No, that's interesting. I was just moving. But yeah, this one's also like a little bit bitter, more bitter than the ones I'm used to from you. Well,
the Okuyutaka by Takaki is a good balance. So it's a bitter, sweet, and acid. So it's more like the Yabukita by Fujioka. So remember we used to have a grade we called Raven? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
So this fits in that category where there's the presence of umami, but you're also tasting the bitters, you're also tasting the tannins, the acid, and they just kind of all balance out nicely. And it pairs really beautifully with dessert for sure.
I like the bitterness to it. I think it's delicious, and like it's perfect with a little bit of oat milk too. On its own, it's perfect.
Yeah,
but,
totally.
But like the contrast with the slightly bitter one with the oat milk, it's like really nice.
Well, what I've noticed is that have you ever had made a rose petal extraction and drank it?
Yeah, actually.
It's actually quite bitter, and I think that's
really bitter.
And it's surprising because it doesn't smell that way, and then when you go and you drink it, it does taste that way. And I think there's something to be said about these kind of floral aromatic compounds. When you taste them, I don't know how connected these are, but I find that there seems to be an association with bitters coming forward. And so what that means to me is that oftentimes really interesting aromatics are coupled with these these flavors. So I don't know. Yeah, I'll have to talk to a food scientist about why that might be the case. But yeah, with this tea, I find it has a really interesting aromatic.
Yeah, it smells amazing, and like you said, it has kind of like almost three flavors. There's like the bitter, sweet, and then the umami. Like you can really taste all three in this one.
And acid. Yeah. Bittersweet and acid we talk about a lot in achieving really excellent flavor balance.
I don't really know what acid tastes like, but
think lemons. Lemons are acidic, so you get
okay. Let me see.
kind of like
Yeah. You know, they do have a term at the farmers markets a lot of the time that's no spray, low spray.
there you go. So
And that's pretty
that's where we're at.
enticing, actually.
That's where we're at with our sourcing. Is we're always encouraging that direction with the farmers that we buy from. We always tell them if they convert any of their lots to organic, we'll buy more volume. I buy small amounts of low spray and high amounts of no spray.
Wow, that's so cool.
And then there's a financial incentive we try to put in place where we'll just keep buying. So Yamaguchi is really taking advantage of that. And he's converting more and more of his farms into organic.
That's so epic.
It's awesome and also scary at the same time. We do need
For
to
everybody.
Well, we need to be able to support that with higher volume, and that is happening. So we're getting higher volume in our matcha sales, and it allows us to say, yeah, go ahead, go nuts, convert what you can.
That's a lot of responsibility on your shoulders, hey?
Well, I think about that sometimes, like when we get into those moments in life where you sort of analyze what you're doing and whether it's something you want to continue. I go sometimes, I'm like, there's a lot of meaningful elements, and one of them is by purchasing tea from these farmers every year, we are contributing to their dependable revenue streams, and then they're going to be using that money for supporting their families and their businesses. And if we get cut out of the equation, in some situations we're a major player for those farmers. In some situations we're a very small piece of the pie, depending on the farmer, right? But I think that the more we, pick up the volume, the more I definitely feel that. Like there's a sense of like, okay, better step up,
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah.
I want to try and find for music, like chemical free, how they have like chemical free polyester. It's never going to be chemical free, but it'll have like less of the harshest chemicals. So like finding that with like music equipment and like merchandise, especially like CDs and vinyls.
Your honeybush marshmallow root and raspberry leaf tea is 100% organic, which is nice.
That's so true.
Yeah.
I just have to find a place to in the States to recycle the pouches.
There you go. Yeah, soft plastics.
I actually, this is crazy, but I have a bag going.
Keep it. Yeah, come back, bring it with you, recycle it here.
I'm gonna go to Montreal and recycle it.
Awesome. Yeah, and that's another interesting one. When we get into packaging, we've had quite a conversation with a number of different folks on how to make that a little bit more sustainable, and we've come away with just, using recyclable materials seems to be the best bet for us right now. If you do, I don't know if you've ever heard of omni-degradable, but that is actually, sounds really great, but it actually just is plastic reducing very quickly to very tiny nanoparticles of plastic.
Oh, gosh.
And that's why it's different from biodegradable.
Oh, and it says degradable versus biodegradable?
Omni-degradable versus biodegradable are two very different things. And you think omni-degradable packaging, that sounds really cool. But you're just creating more microplastics, which is frightening in and of itself. So, anyway, we shoot for companies, like our tins are all tested so that they don't off-gas. And also that they don't leach heavy metals into the tea. So that's lab tested, and that's from the same company that produces our pouches. And the pouches are tested too. So at least you're not getting off-gassing and leaching of hormones and chemicals into your tea.
Wow, that's so awesome.
So
I want to do a water sample test at all our residences on the island.
think it's a good call. Yeah.
I'll send you one from here too.
Be interesting. How does the tea taste? Are we in a good place?
It's great.
Yeah?
It's fantastic. I diluted it a bit. It has like honestly like probably the perfect balance.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, I'm into
What
this.
do you think?
It's a new one for me. I think it's kind of on the border between being a cafe standard and a reserve tea for us. I think it's a little bit more, doesn't have as much umami as say the Yabukita by Fujioka, but it's priced accordingly. This is not that much more expensive than buying one of our owls or our cafe standards. So on our webpage, it's $27 versus $32, whereas the Yabukita by Fujioka is more like a $36. Or the Samidori blend that we were planning to do this week, but we'll be doing next week instead, is $50, $55 actually on our webpage. So significantly more expensive. So anyhow.
Yeah. How about the Shimayama? Is that one lightly sprayed or no spray?
Lightly sprayed. Yeah, everything from Fujioka is. Takaki's Yabukita is completely unsprayed. All of the Yamaguchi selections are unsprayed.
Cool.
The other selections are all lightly sprayed. So yeah.
Okay.
But we used to do 100% organic, and for a very long time we just couldn't find farmers that could create product that was palatable. We used to buy from a company in Kyoto Prefecture called the Harima family, Harimaen, and their product was quite nice when we first started buying it, and over time, I don't know if our taste changed or if the product changed, but it became more and more challenging to work with as a traditional matcha. Still very good as a latte or as a sipping matcha, but yeah. And then we stopped working with them and we started working with Fujioka just because I don't know, I think there's a certain amount of, I struggle with this because I want to enjoy what I'm drinking and eating too, but maybe it's less important to me than that it's medicinally powerful. So I don't know how to reconcile those two. But I love it when they just make it easy for me, when it tastes good and it's organic.
Well, one of the solutions might be what you're talking about, like how we see nature, like having different crops growing together, ones that will keep bugs off of the leaves.
Yeah, or just like I think also it's retraining your own palate to search for things in foods and drinks that are really prevalent in the organic versions that might not be considered like competition grade. Maybe the color isn't as nice, or the aromatics aren't as nice, or there might not be as much umami. But rather than focusing on all the things that are diminished, maybe look at these increased aromatics, look at this interesting flavor complexity, look at this, kind of balancing that out with the gains. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that it's also like gonna take a lot of time to figure out how nature creates a little bit more sweetness, if that does exist more naturally too, because like you have peppers that are sweet peppers that are genetically modified, they're huge, they look pretty, and then you have these organic grown peppers that are like grown with a lot of other different foods so that bugs don't get the foods. There's like microorganisms people use sometimes to fend off bugs, like ladybugs for aphids, for instance.
Totally.
Ladybugs. Yeah. So that using that kind of thing.
The Harima family talks about that quite a bit, actually. When we went and we toured their farm, they would talk about what they're planting to fend off pests and things like this. And I think it also might just be that the plants are a little older. Like that can happen. Like they talk about when the plants reach 45 years old, etc., they start to lose their flavor vibrancy because they're often planting cuttings, right? Propagation in tea can happen two ways. You can allow the shrub to grow, like when you clip off the tops that kind of sprout up. You've seen this with like laurel bushes and stuff, right? Like they sprouts, and you kind of, to keep it in shape, you cut off the flush of the plant. Well, you can actually take those and you can plug them into the ground, at least for the tea plant, and then it will propagate, and you'll grow more of that same cultivated variety or cultivar. Your other way that you can grow the tea plant is if you don't fertilize it heavily, then it starts to produce flowers and seeds, and then you can actually take those seeds and you can plug them into the ground and you can grow from seed, when you grow from seed, you get a completely different variety of tea plant than you would if you grow from the cutting.
Mm-hmm.
And this happens with apples too. Like if I want to have gala apples, I have to graft gala apple branches onto rootstock. If
teas like that too?
Yeah. So if I wanted to grow the same variety of apple, that's what I need to do. Otherwise, I can be like Johnny Appleseed, and I can just plant seeds, and then who knows what I'm going to get. And that's fun too, but it's definitely less consistent. You're not going to be sure what you get. You're not going to be able to know if all the work you're putting into managing it is actually going to produce a flavor that you're really stoked about. So, yeah. Anyway, where was I going with that? It's just
flavor, organic, getting better flavor for.
But when you do the roots, like when you plant the cuttings, they only last for 40, 50 years. And then what is common practice is to completely rip them out and then plant new ones. Whereas when you do the seed grown ones, they often last for hundreds of years. They have very strong roots. And all of the ones, like for example, in Mandokoro, they're like, when they go to replace them, it's quite like when they were taking some of them out, they went so deep, and so they try to just not. And in Mandokoro, they just every 30, 40 years, they just cut them right down to close to the roots, clip them like when you're managing, say, herbal plants, and then they just grow back, and 3 years later, they're harvestable again and completely regenerated, beautiful leaves that were at one point not producing really flavorful tea. They start producing really flavorful tea. So kind of interesting.
Have you done any blends of like organic and low spray?
Yeah, I have actually. Yeah, I did. I did the Shimoyama with the. You actually have one, with the Ninotani. You actually have it there. Yeah. That's.
I just finished it all.
Okay, the 20%. The 20%. We should have done that one today, hey? If we had.
I know. I was like, oh, I did.
No, when I gave that one to you, I said, just enjoy this. This isn't one we're gonna do on JagaVision, but we'll probably do one of those on JagaVision at some point. So the 20%. Ninotani, 20% Shimoyama, 80% Ninotani. And when I say Ninotani, that we do get 2 selections from the Ninotani microclimate. That's from Yamaguchi. He does an Okumidori Ninotani and he does a Yabukita Ninotani. And the Yabukita Ninotani is the one that's a little bit more bitter. And that one we blend with the Okumidori Shimoyama to sort of bring up the umami portion a bit so that it's a more cafe acceptable selection. Otherwise, it's just too bitter. Like the bitters are just so pronounced that it's a little bit overwhelming. So yeah, throwing in a little bit of the really good stuff helps.
Yeah, I was just thinking about for the next Music Friday in October, maybe there could be like a pumpkin theme using local pumpkin growing.
We could just play pumpkins. It's like drums.
Yeah, we could with the drums. Oh, that's a great idea.
There is a drum instrument built off of a gourd. It's pretty sweet. I'll have to.
That's true.
Anyhow, I did ask for you to come on the show for just a short one and look at what's happened. But thank you for joining me today, though, Sherri Anne. Do you want to maybe let people know that are watching where they can find your music before we go?
Yeah, sisterspeakmusic.com or patreon.com/sisterspeak. I'm doing the weekly Thursday at 12 West Coast time. That's 3 in Montreal/New York. That's 9:00 p.m. in Berlin.
An extra special, always as stable as possible audio video for your Patreon viewers, correct?
Yes, and long-term access.
And otherwise, people have you sometimes, when you're able to, you broadcast to Facebook or Instagram on those accounts.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And always lovely to watch your shows. We love playing them here in the T-Bar. So
cool.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, and next week we're supposed to have a rebooking of Camellia sinensis. We'll see what happens. People watching, and we'll have to just stay tuned on our social media. But thank you so much, Sherri Anne, for joining me today and having a bowl of this Okuyutaka by Takaki. We only have a little bit of it left, and then it's going to be here and then gone kind of idea. So
Thank you.
Yeah.
I only have a little bit left too.
Awesome. Well, next week, don't drink it all up. Samidori blend by Takaki. So we'll.
Okay.
She's like.
I'll switch over to Sencha this week and Singer's Delight.
Nice. I think I need to hook you up with more matcha, hey? Just so can keep it going. Yeah. We JagaSilk sponsors Sister Speak with tea and has for over 10 years, I guess. Close to. Yeah. And it's always lovely to see our logo on your posters around the world, and thank you for always drinking tea with your music, and super appreciate you.
Thank you. Likewise, I'm going to add you to the Costa Rica flyer now.
Awesome. Okay, cool. All right, thank you. Have a wonderful day, and let's all stay. I guess honor this the Indigenous Reconciliation Day that's happening here in Canada, and see what we can do for turning it into an Indigenous reconciliation decade and 100 years, and just figure this out somehow. So thank you for joining us, Sherri Anne.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
All right, so thank you very much, everybody, for joining me today. The show we had planned didn't actually happen today, but I think it was really interesting regardless to go over some philosophies and thoughts with Sherri Anne from Sister Speak. She's always a great guest, and huge appreciation for her making this weekly contribution of her time to join us and make it happen. The tea that I'm drinking today, the Okuyutaka by Takaki, is a really nice balance of bitter, sweet, and acid, and even more enjoyable as it cools. I really appreciate that we were able to get our hands on this tea this year. I encourage you to check it out. It's on our webpage right now. You can go to jagasilk.com. If you're in Victoria, consider stopping by the tea bar tomorrow. We'll be donating food, drink, and retail sales to supporting the legal fund for the Wet'suwet'en at the Unistoten Healing Center that's trying to stop the essential pillaging of their traditional territories by Coastal GasLink, which are backed by the BC and federal governments. So let's hope they can, get your support. And hope to see you at the tea bar tomorrow. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. We will see you next week, Thursday, 1 o'clock.